your loyal listeners. I think I agree with you because education, health, and employment is the first policy the first time voters, will look out for in a party's manifesto. Because after education, what's next? You go and work. But after, if you are done with your education and there's no employment, what are you going to use the education for? And in all things, after anything you do, health is paramount because you don't know what will happen tomorrow. So education, employment, and health. That is it for me.
Stephen, you agree?
Yeah, I also agree. But when we are talking about education here, it is very, very vital. But when we are talking about employment, I think it is not. The onus doesn't lie on the government to provide employment for the people always. Sometimes, as we have acquired knowledge, we have to go and fish out for our own job. I always say that we are the job opportunity of ourselves. So we don't need to depend on the government always. But even though the government has to play their part, we must also play our part. Thank you very much.
Some would say that the part the government has to play is probably the most important part to create the right environment, Stephen.
Yes, the government will create the right environment. Then the question is, after that, what next? Yes, that's where we also come in. So after the government have created the right environment for each and every one of us, then now the onus, the responsibility now lies on us that we should go out there and create our jobs. We should go out there and get our jobs on our own. Else we'll sit there and we'll be like, there's no job, there's no job. But you see, when you sit down and create a job of your own, you see that now you are making profit and you are moving on. And we've heard so many private owners say that they get enough money than being a public worker. So I think, yes, the government will play their part, but we, the citizens of Mother Ghana, must also play our part.
Now, of course, full disclosure, Stephen is a sympathizer of the party in government. Now, you are. You are, aren't you? I mean, before we had the discussion and you intimated that your thoughts lean more towards the party in government, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to guess that your assessment of the creation of a right environment would be for them would be a good one. You would think that they've done well.
Yes. It's the truth. They've done really well. The governments have done really well.
Okay.
And I think we have evidences. Yes. So
I'll come back to you to interrogate that evidence more. Martha, your issues. Is there anything outside of these three big issues that you like to place attention on? Yeah, the three big issues of education, health, and employment. Is there anything outside these three that you feel matters to you the most, or for you these three are still the most important?
Okay. Personally, I think these three are important to me. I think it focuses more on the youth, and then looking at where I am now, and then where I'm moving to in life. I'm in school. I'll be completing school. I think education is really important, and then I'm into the health sector. So I think these three are the most important things to me right now.
And Nana Kujo Apologist is also here.
Hello, Daniel Dadzie.
Yes, welcome back to Ghana Connect. It's been a while since we had you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. What are your top three issues as well?
I think these mainstream factors that you've mentioned here are things which leads a country as a whole, because in governance you cannot take out education. Also in governance you cannot take out health. Also in governance you cannot take out employment, because to develop the resource of a country you need to develop them by building their intellectual capacity. Also, in order to have a very good resource in a country, you need to make sure that they are very good in terms of health, and also employment, to make sure that is when they are going to gain income to take care of their families. So you would realize that all these things are interconnected. And so in a realization, I think in going to the polls to vote to choose a leader, you must think about these things, about the policies political parties have in place for the resource, which depends on these factors that I've touched on.
Now, Kofi, the last time you came on Ghana Connect, we had a big conversation about corruption. It would interest you to note that less than 50 of the 1,407 people interviewed had elimination of corruption as their priority, as government's responsibility. Isn't this an important issue?
Well, I think it's a critical issue. Corruption has been a very major bane to development of Ghana, Africa, and probably the entire world as a whole. And it would interest you to know that if you are supposed to interrogate them further, they would accept the fact that corruption is a major issue in this country. We have seen this government in the bad rap sheet of corruption. And I think the major reason why the youth wouldn't have so much a problem about corruption is that consistently, since the Fourth Republic incepted, or probably since independence, every government has been corrupt. And that is sort of mindset the youth have about corruption. And so for them, corruption wouldn't really matter to them. But then if you look at the monies that are spent through dubious means, through illegal means, through corruption, you realize that those monies can be used to improve significantly all of these sectors we have mentioned. Only that people do not really feel the direct impact of corruption as they will feel the direct impact of education or healthcare or bad healthcare. And so if the people think that they are getting free SHS and government is looting through supposedly the dubious Ejapa deal, they really don't care about that. And that's the sort of perception a lot of people hold. But then we cannot rule out the fact that corruption would be an important element in this election. And if people throw challenges at that, in the recent election, 2016, a lot of people thought that the state of corruption under the John Mahama administration caused the defeat. And so these people predominantly were a lot of new kind of fresh voters. Some were in the middle class who had to go to the ballot to decide for themselves how they wanted the future to be. So, with the three sectors that you have made mention of, in terms of education, for example, we have heard of the two parties make very stupendous argument or debate as to how they want to improve upon the education sector. NPP has free education as their trump card. NDC is promising to implement Chimpe, and by extension, enhancing the Chimpe policy by bringing on board the Fanina policy and all. Now you realize that our politics has shifted from shallow speeches to one that admits on good policies, good argument, and right thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, in the past we used to have a lot of propaganda, Now we've had a lot of seriousness in...
It's a more matured space.
Exactly. Seriousness and more maturity in terms of our national discourse and conversation. And that exactly is what we want to see. I personally want to see a country where education is free right from the basic school to the university. We can do it. And the only way we can do it is to enhance rich political debate. If a political party is promising to absorb the fees of free SHS graduate, the opponent is tempted or forced to even do something greater than that. And that is the sort of politics we need. If you look at healthcare, for example, the present government is thinking of building about 88 district hospitals and
111 hospitals
so
in total.
In total. The NDC is also planning to ensure free primary healthcare. If you look at page 62 of their manifesto, and so you would also align that to rich political debate that we've had so far. And that is better because if you look at the sustainable development goals, by 2030, the countries that fall under that section are supposed to ensure free universal health coverage. And Ghana by 2025 is going to achieve it by 5 years ahead of the expected plan.
Okay.
But you see, my issue has always been with the quality of it. Almost every time we are mistaken under the impression that once government is promising free, then so be it. We do not care, or we are not so much concerned about how sustainable they are, how quality they are. And that goes to the extent of affecting us. We have always admitted the frailties and policy iniquities of free SHS. And the reason why it has been a major debate in terms of this election in particular, both government or
you know what? I want to come back to you on that point because I want us to spend a bit more time on the specific promises that have been made and how this government has prepared, has dealt with these issues. But Emmanuel has joined us on the line from Takrady. Emmanuel, good evening. Welcome to Ghana Connect.
Good evening, sir.
So, Emmanuel, I understand that you're not too happy with how this government has been handling affairs in the past 4 years.
True.
Why?
Okay, basically, when you look at the promises that this government came with, we were expecting a lot from the government in terms of they fighting corruption. But recently, we all can attest to the fact that it's now being downplayed, that they were unable to eliminate corruption as they said they will.
So it looks like Kofi and Emmanuel are very worried about corruption. But Kobe, realistically speaking, again, and I'll look at the data here, I'm yet to see a pre-election survey which ranks corruption as a matter that as an issue that really matters to a Ghanaian voter. On the other hand, you go to the Afrobarometer survey and they say that corruption is one of the most important issues that Ghanaians feel our government must deal with. So where from this disconnect, Kobe?
There's no disconnection in this regard, because if you look at our survey, you would see that nearly 2 in 10 of all the people we surveyed said they were not going to vote. And one of the reasons they gave was that they do not see that their vote will affect any change in the system that they see. That there's no, if you like, your abilities will not take you where you want to be. So there's no fairness, there's no equity. And so they don't think that by going to make a decision that is going to change anything. And for me, that was curious. And you find people, particularly in higher institutions of learning, so you are at a tertiary educational institution campus and you are interacting with people, and then this comes up and they say, no, that's why I'm not interested in politics, that is why I'm not going to vote. And if you look at the number of people who said they were not interested in politics, you're talking about nearly 8 out of 10 of the people we surveyed said they are not interested in politics. And one of the reasons they cited is corruption. However, you have 3 items to determine or to list as your expectations. You will probably not think of corruption as one of them. But then in further interaction, you realize that corruption was an important subject matter to them. As to whether it is something they want to rank as one of their top priorities, it's another issue altogether. But it does not mean that for these young people, corruption is not something that is important, and that they do not see it as something that is depriving them of the resources and of the infrastructure that is. I'll give you an example. In Akrabo, which is in the Suhum constituency,
in the eastern region.
In the eastern region. Before you get there, you should be worried that nobody will raise the subject of the poor nature of the roads with you. And then nearly every individual you talk to, whether in survey administration or focus group discussion, considers that as a very important subject matter. However, majority of the people who commute through that area don't even do it on a 4-legged vehicle. They do it on motorbikes. And they still see the road as so porous that it makes their traveling, not comfortable.
Okay.
And so it is not something that we can sweep under the carpet or assume that it is not of importance to first-time voters.
Prince, so let me come to you. Does corruption matter to you when you're going to the polls on Monday?
It matters because you mentioned education, health, and employment. In delivering those policies, you can see that there's some kind of corruption embedded in that. Because when you want to have some kind of quality education to the people, for instance, I'm going to school, I've gained admission to some kind of courses, but at some places you have to pay some money before such courses are given to you. You can see that there is some kind of corruption there. About healthcare, you can take your national health insurance card to the hospital, but you'll still be demanded to pay some money before you even be attended to. You can be there with your card, someone will bring a lot of money, and the person will be attended to before the doctor sees you. So, as a first-time voter, the 3 things, education, health, and employment, there's some kind of corruption there. So, it depends on the government to, for the lack of better word, clear the corruption there and give us some kind of quality in the policies.
But Martha, do you honestly believe that it is any political party in Ghana is willing and able to deal with corruption decisively?
Okay, honestly, I think corruption is something, it's so broad. It will be difficult for a particular party to say, I'm completely removing corruption. Because maybe the party would say, I'm removing corruption, but then whoever is in that position at that moment maybe wouldn't be a member of that party, but then would still practice corruption. So I think they could maybe they could observe more, or they could pay attention to certain things and then make the law work. Or probably they could pass a law that would hold those who practice corruption, um, maybe it would, I don't know, it would do something that would deter others from practicing. But then taking it out of the system completely, I don't think it's possible, because there would be others who will still practice it. But then the law could help deter others from doing that.
So, Stephen, we have Emmanuel on the phone line who says that your government has not performed well in dealing with corruption. And we have Martha who says that it's almost impossible for the NDC or the NPP to do something about it. What say you?
Okay, so with the issue of corruption here, let's be realistic here. You realize one thing, that in 2019, I was at a place with some European Union members and some high commissioners, and we all reached an agreement that corruption is everywhere, and you cannot eradicate corruption totally from the system, but you can actually minimize it. In 2020, I think in August, I was in a conference again with Transparency International with a branch in Ghana, GII. And a group of youth also made the same assertion that corruption cannot be eradicated. But I bet you, when we are talking about the incumbent government, we are one of the government that I think and I know have tried our best possible to eradicate corruption in this country. And I think we all know what happened in previous years, where we had the opposition party there, and we saw what happened. We knew all these issues happening, and we saw how the past president acted as to corruption. And
How did he
could see
act?
those things.
How did he act?
Okay, so here we would know that internationally, in fact, worldwide, he was tagged as a corrupt leader. Can you imagine?
Tagged by who?
Actually, he was tagged by a corrupt leader. Actually, come again. Yes, thank you very much. So the BBC video actually informed we Ghanaians that the president who was coming in has been tagged as a world corrupt leader. And you see, yes, he was the president by then. And so how can we now Ghanaians say that we are going to vote for? And if you check his manifesto, if you check the manifesto of the party NDC, you see and dealing with corruption and ensuring accountability. We've given you 12. We've given you 8 years to rule, 8 good years, and we saw you partaking in corruption, nepotism, and other things. So the question to my brother here is that he should bring us evidence. He should bring us evidence claiming that okay. this and this happened, and this is what I saw, and this is what they are saying. Then we also know what to do.
Okay, so 2 things. The first thing is that I will assume that you are referring to that interview President John Mahama, then President, had with Peter Okoche of the BBC, where he asked him if he has taken a bribe before.
Yeah.
And he asked a follow-up. The president asked a follow-up question: do you mean as a human or as a president? How does that tag Mr. Mahama as corrupt?
Okay, you see, sometimes when some questions are being asked, because you know what you are doing, you intentionally bring in some rhetorical questions and certain things to minimize the question, or to minimize the burden that particular question is pushing onto you.
So it's the way he answered the question.
Yes, that's the way he answered the question.
My second point is that your master stroke in fighting corruption was the appointment of Martin Amidu.
Yeah.
Mr. Amidu has called Mr. Akufo-Addo, President Akufo-Addo, the mother serpent when it comes to corruption.
Okay, so you see, I always say that it is politics, it is politics that we are doing. You might not know what your opponent will be planning, and you see, when the president appointed Martin Amidu, we all attest the fact that, okay, Martin Amidu was going to play a vital role in curbing corruption. We could see the demands that he made to the government, and he was provided all these demands. But he's saying that, okay, the incumbent government led by Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo is a corrupt leader. Why doesn't he forward it to court? He should take it to court and deal with that. If he's unable to do that, then he should just keep quiet and sit down. Because we have a court that can deal with those things, and now you are there and you are just saying it. So it's like words against words. Talk and talk. Nothing is happening. So if you are saying that the president is corrupt, prove it. Send it to court. Be Ghana's second and us. Prove it for us to see. If you're unable to do that, then you have to keep quiet and just sit down.
Be careful what you wish for. He's done exactly that before. Kofi, you were shifting in your seat when the man was talking.
Surprising, my brother is engaging in, quite lazy propaganda. I mean, it's a youth conversation. We are supposed to have a very
Make your points, Kofi.
nationalistic conversation. How
Make
we
your points.
intend to,
without attacking Stephen.
I'm not
personally.
attacking.
Make your
I
points.
have to state the point that it's quite unfortunate for him to use all those vitriolic words against certain personalities, and that is not what is expected from the youth. He is claiming that this government has made enough effort to fight corruption. In fact, Mr. Martin Amidu was appointed by the president and given certain responsibilities to deliver. Then he comes back and say that it is the same person that appointed me that obstructed my sense of duty. With evidence. What Martin Amidu presented were not claims. He provided certain evidences to back all of his claims. And so for you to say that...
What evidence?
The evidences of the 27-page document he brought up.
Was that not his account that was denied by the president?
Exactly. So we needed to hear both sides. You would attest to what the Ateran part. You need to hear both sides of the stories in order to make a sound judgment of what two supposed situations are. And we've heard that of the presidency. We've heard that of Amidu. In fact, Amidu did claim that the presidency didn't read before even responding to him. In fact, he says that this government has been able to deal with corruption. We are aware of PDS scandal. We are aware of Ijapa. We are aware of the stinking missing 400 tricycles. We are aware of missing excavators. We are aware of a lot of scandals that have bathed this government under this First Republic. That is not to say that former governments are all saints and pontificating righteousness in terms of governance. But then for you to claim that this government has presented the best fight against corruption is something that we must not sit here and entertain. You get me? It's something that we must not sit here to entertain. We are trying to point out the issues and tease out the real conversations about how we can develop the country.
Okay.
GII, the same program you attended, Ghana Integrity Initiative, did point out the fact that about 3 billion Ghana cedis, or 3 billion, I think dollars rather, are missing through corruption annually. And we have seen all the evidences that have been brought out. You multimedia here, you have been denied a lot of occasions to air and expose a lot of fraudulent and stinking deals of government. You can attest to that fact. The NLA scandal, you had a lot of interruptions and interceptions by government. You were to also...
Which government denied?
Well, they would deny, but they have the NCA. And the NCA can use dubious manipulations and schemes to frustrate, exposés. You have a scandal that you were to release until... I think I've forgotten that state institution. They have placed a certain injunction.
The FDA.
The FDA.
It's now subjudice.
It's now subdued.
Subjudice, it's
all right. So you're having elections on the 7th of December. Probably your thinking is that may influence whether that may expose government to let the public know what exactly government is doing that is wrong. Under previous administrations, whether President Mahama, President Kufuor, or President Rawlings, or President Mills, the media was given the laxity of time and space to interrogate government, to bring out the issues affecting the common Ghanaian, to look at what certain individuals or certain state officials are doing that is wrong, to look out for how people are badly reaping the resources of the state. But then we do not find it under this government. Journalists who are investigating this government are tortured. You get me? A lot of them are put under uncomfortable situations such that they are not able to perform their responsibilities freely. Today, media freedom is under critical attack. Is that what we need as a country? And that is not to add a voice for whatever alternative government or whatever, but then to sit here and claim sacrosanctity of the MPP government is very wrong.
Interesting
All of us
points
here
there.
can entirely witness the fact that there has been a lot of corruption scandals under this administration.
Interesting points there. I want to go to Nana Kofi with that point. Kofi says all of us here can witness that so much has happened under this government. Nana Kofi, does that include you?
The name is Nana Kojo.
Pardon me. Does that include you?
Oh no, definitely not. But then you see, the issue of corruption is not only restricted to people in government. I think we are actually having a wrong perception about the issue of corruption in Ghana, because the issue of corruption It's not about people in high offices, but then we as a nation, we as a country, citizens, what is our approach towards resolving the issue of corruption? It's not about party A, party B. What is happening down there, down here? What goes on in our homes, in our day-to-day activities? How do we go about doing these activities? Do we influence people to do certain things for us? I mean, we should all ask ourselves these questions. How can we be truthful to ourselves? Rather than making the argument that MPP has been corrupt, we look at this, citing examples. That is not
Okay.
what is going to change the issue of corruption.
But
in Ghana.
government still has a responsibility.
Of course,
Uh-huh.
government has a responsibility in it, a responsibility to deal with corruption.
Mhm.
But then, dealing with issues of corruption is more of moral, attributes. Because if I am morally inclined, and you offer me a bribe, I would decline it. It's as simple as that. And so, issues when we are talking about corruption, corruption starts from our homes. And so, if you are able to deal with corruption in our homes, then we will be, solving such issues and be, minimizing the high cases of corruption at the government level. And so, we should start from our homes. That is the best way we can resolve
Right.
issues of corruption.
Let me go back to the phone lines and get a quick response from Emmanuel on what he has heard so far. I believe you've been listening into the conversation. We are trying to look at how much influence corruption would have when we are all going to vote on Monday. Emmanuel, I want a final comment from you on this one. Given the handling of corruption you have seen these past 4 years and what Stephen Nana Kojo have been saying, what really is your take on how much this should influence young people when they go to the polls on Monday?
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. It should influence young people because, you see, looking at the fight against corruption is going to help we young ones. Because, one, the monies which are being embezzled that the country is losing out of these shady deals, these corrupt behaviors, at the end, we are the ones going to suffer of it. So we should be mindful of it. For instance, we can look at certain issues. My issue with the government is they tend to, let me say, prevent those people who want to fight corruption. For instance, let's look at Domilovo's case. Mr. Domilovo was at the verge of finding out a crucial information which was going to help the country. But the president said, proceed on leave. You see, couldn't the president has also excused him so that he finished with what he was doing and then he proceed on the leave? Why that particular moment? What did the president felt was going to happen, so he had to let the man proceed on leave?
They argue it was a matter of law, that the president was simply obeying the law, which is enjoined to do so.
Yes, indeed. But the man was trying to do something. The man was helping the country. It's not that I don't think maybe Domlevo was there because he was enjoying monthly salary. As he proceeded on leave, he still gets a salary, isn't it?
Right.
So why are we saying law once he was doing something?
Interesting.
So with this issue, I think the young electorate should look out of these and many issues, and even with recently Martin Abidi's issue, and they should get a copy and read. When you read it, you see that, as he said Ekufuado is what the mother serpent of corruption. Not that other governments are saying, but what is going on in this particular government is unprecedented. So you can look at a lot of scandals of which a member was even citing examples to. We are all watchful of these issues. If they want to, they are bringing up a conversation of political conversation. Let's look at the scandals in this particular government, and let's look at the scandals in the previous administration, and just let's compare. I urge all electors to do that kind of analysis, and then they should compare the monies involved. Then
Right.
they should incite them on what to do on 7th December.
Right. Okay. So let's. I don't think that we will find a good agreement on the issue of corruption, but I think we can all agree around the table that it's something to think about and it's something for you to evaluate. We've also talked about education, health, and employment, which are also very important issues. But Kobe, I want to come back to you because you also did some research on youth representation in Parliament.
Yes.
And give me a quick word on that, and also an opinion from you. Do you think that if more young people are in Parliament, the kind of politics we do in this country will change?
First of all, the evidence is that even the current 5% of young people in Parliament will diminish in the next Parliament. I mean, we are talking about representation age, which is between 21 and 35. We will not find up to even 11 of such people in the next Parliament, because you see, it's a bracket that people grow out of. And so someone like Sam Nati George, he will be 35 by the commencement of the next Parliament, but he grows out of it in the first month. And so even if he adds the 10 that will begin the next Parliament, by February he's no longer within that age bracket. Now, in a presentation that I did last week, I pointed out that some parties have given an indication by way of allowing people within that age bracket to contest. And so you go to Kwabre East, where the young lady entered in her 20s. If she stays in Parliament, she could be there for maybe 4 electoral cycles before she gets out of that age
As
bracket.
Francisco Tin-Mensah.
And so if the political parties are willing to leave some of these safe seats for younger people, that will help increase the numbers there. Now, the second leg of your question is whether or not those young people articulate the viewpoints and the perspectives of young people. I'm not sure, because I've spent quite a number of years in Parliament as a reporter in the past, and I don't get that sense. And so, and it's also about the young people themselves. To what extent do they engage these people? Because the fact that you have a brother in space does not necessarily mean that when it rains, you learn of it first. You know, there has to be a way for connection so that the young people will know that this is our guy and he's doing our bidding. But if the young people are getting there and they're not doing the bidding necessarily of young people, and they're just supposed to be poster individuals, poster man, poster woman for young people, who is not actually articulating the viewpoints of young people, then you're crying now,
You know. Kofi, I want you to weigh in on this for me. We want to see a different kind of politics. I'm sure you can agree. We want to see something that speaks more to the people sitting in this room. Would having someone between the age of 21 and 35 make that difference?
Well, I think yes. Because if you pick the register today, you have about, he did describe
55%.
55% of the population, voter population, as youth. And so the expectation is that you have a proportional representation of youth in Parliament to articulate the viewpoints of youth and the problems affecting the youth generally in this country. But in the past, if you look at the 8 differences of parliamentarians, it looks like we ran a gerontocracy in Ghana, where you have the rule of the old, and that has been the past since independence to date. And that is not to say that the old have not articulated a viewpoint of the young. It is not always the case that the young must go and represent the views of the the young. So the situation we've had as regards the participation of young people in politics has been with arrogance of power, the fact that they come and then they insult the oldies in the system. They have not properly presented a certain good brand about how politics should be in this country. And so more often than not, people prefer the old taking the reins of power than even the young. Because if you look at how things have been, we would prefer an old man. And again, for the perception that the old is ascribed with wisdom. A lot of people feel that
I think it's a cultural thing.
Exactly.
In Africa, we ascribe, we ascribe gray hair with wisdom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if the young can continue to spearhead the youth agenda, to speak for the voiceless, and not to be engulfed with corruption, arrogance of power, we would find a situation one day where the young would advocate for the reduction of age for one to be president in this country. And that would be the revolution of our century.
Martha, for a continent that has the youngest population in the world, it would interest you to note that our presidents are the oldest in the world when it comes to the mean age.
Well, I don't want to mention that because that was going to make my argument a bit biased.
when it comes to the mean age, Martha, what do you make of this? And should this change? Should we see more young people in parliament taking up these roles?
I think we should see more people in parliament, but because when these old people retire or when they are weakened, or we are still the same people who are going to make these decisions and who are going to rule us. So I think the number is quite low now, because I think looking in parliament now, we have about 13 young people. So we still have room to improve. We should encourage the youth, and then we should involve them in decision making, even though they are not old and all. They are youth, and then most of the policies made in the manifestos are youth centered. So I think if they are involved, they would bring out some. I don't know. They'll help.
They would help. It will just be
Yes.
better. Generally in life,
Yes,
it will be
please.
better.
Yes,
Prince,
it will be better.
what do you expect from the young people who are already there? We heard Kobe say that the young people who are there have not really made a stand for young people. What do you expect from them, Prince?
They've not really made a stand because the older ones, they have not created the chance for them to make a stand. I believe that when in an environment, even the little child also have an idea of solving a problem. So when the younger ones get into parliament, the older ones should also create channels for them. They should also build the stage for them to also stand on and take decisions. Because you can go to a house right now, there's a problem and they are solving it. You realize that the child even brings a better solution compared to the solution the parents are bringing on board. But the younger ones get into parliament and their ideas, their decisions, their ideologies are suppressed by the older ones, which is not the best thing we can write home. So even political parties should not give the percentage of the youth that will be given the chance to enter parliament. It should be open. There should not be a percentage that are giving 20% to the youth in a political party to get a chance to enter parliament. It should be open for us all.
Okay.
So that
Right. Oh, go ahead.
so that when it's open like that, you see that more of them will bring ideas which will even help compared to the ideas the older ones will bring on board.
So, Nana Kojo, Prince introduces an interesting thought that the older generation is not allowing young people to also express themselves. Do you agree?
No, I don't. Because I think in this parliament, you realize that there have been certain people in parliament who are specifically in the youth range who have done very, very well. One I can speak about is Honorable Kojo Oppong Nkrumah, who has actually in the COVID time has proved to many of us, the youth, that there's room for us to make ourselves or make our issues known. And you realize that he's actually making an impact in parliament, knowing very well that he's an outspoken person. And so that has in one way or the other inspired many of us to take up leadership positions, because he makes us realize that the Ghana we are heading towards is not about the old or it's not about the young. Anyone can take up a leadership position. And so, like he said, there shouldn't be a certain margin of youth parliamentarians at parliament. No, that is not like that. But then once anyone can take up that position and show a leadership of service and can do due diligence to serve his constituents, why not? You can go contest and take up the position.
I see Kofi agreeing in studio. It's the first time Kofi has agreed with Nana Kojo since the conversation began. Manuel Cranting has joined us with your comments on social media and via WhatsApp. Manuel.
Yes, Daniel, a number of messages are coming through all our platforms on Facebook, Twitter, and also on WhatsApp. Let me go straight to the WhatsApp console because this one says that the development or the progress of a country depends on the level of corruption in that country. When our leaders are genuine and truthful in the management of the nation's affairs, no matter how little the resources are, they will be used to developing the country. This one says, surprised someone will say this government has done anything to fight corruption. This country is bleeding heavily through corruption and the government is doing nothing. Charles from Legon sent that one. This one also says, what I will advise most young people of today is that they should not look at a campaign talk of free education, but something more than that and better for their future. This one also says Ghana's case, and it's puts a very interesting analogy. It says that Ghana's case is like a man who married 10 women, and the way he takes care of them is to borrow money every day and share it with them, and he's praising himself that he's doing well. He's a good husband, and for that matter, planning to marry 10 more. What kind of man borrows for his household every day? Ghana is actually not ready for free things now. We are sinking in debt. Daniel, so that one is addressed to you. It says, is from Wisdom Lumo from Kaswa. Daniel, what a way to...
What's an analogy? That must be a very, very interesting man. I want to meet him. We have 5 minutes to end the conversation. I want to get a final word around the table, and I will begin with Emmanuel. Throughout this entire conversation, we've talked about issues that matter to us, and we've talked about youth representation in Parliament. What thought have you gathered from listening to others in this conversation, Emmanuel, that you are leaving with?
Oh, thank you very much. The thought I've gathered with this whole conversation is that we as youth should not solely depend on the government for employment. We should find something to do with our hands. We should make sure that we create an employment for ourselves than depending solely on the government. Because if we do that, the country is not going to move on.
Emmanuel, thank you. Interestingly, that's Stephen's thought, and you disagreed with him in most of the conversation. So we are finding consensus around the table. I love it. Kofi, what have you heard someone else say that really stands out to you?
I think the point that you do not really need the factor of age to determine the drive of conversation around youth development. Yes. And my conscious appeal to youth, let me add this, that this is one of the most important elections in our national life, like it has always been. We shouldn't go to the polls with the mindset of going to defend politicians with machetes, axes, knives, guns. The country would not be fair for us all, should we all die. They have the means to escape, to run away, to save themselves in the very dying moment of this country. And so we must look up to ourselves first. That in the future we also take the reins of power. Let us not collapse the country we would grow one day to benefit from. Yeah.
Kofi Kilson, thank you so much, Martha.
Okay, I think whatever party that would reign or that will rule come December 7th elections, I think whatever party that will come on, we shouldn't look at. We should just see a better Ghana. We should, in our own little way, do something to promote our country. Because listening to what we said, we heard corruption is not just at the top. It begins from home. It's
from
a moral
the bottom.
Something.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and then I urge all youth to at least to vote.
To go out there and exercise their franchise.
No matter what happens after the elections, you still need to your one vote counts.
The so one vote counts is important. Prince.
So I want to encourage the youth from listening to my friends in the studio. We should be more objective in our political debate in Ghana as at now. It's so sad you see a youth affiliated to a political party at this stage of his life, to the extent that if the political party is even flopping, because the parents are affiliated to such political party, you cannot detach from it. But I think youth should be more objective. We should look at policies that will benefit us, we should look at the goals and our future things that we want to attain. So, and I'm urging the youth to be part of the solution. As we vote, let's vote for one Ghana. Let's vote for peace, and peace will reign forever. Thank you.
Amen. Stephen?
Yeah, thank you very much. There is this quote, my personal quote, and I want to share it with the youth. To the youth out there, let's note that what we will consider as tragedy is no longer death. It is when we exist to see our generation fail. And you see, I'm very, very optimistic, and I know that Ghana will be developed, or Ghana will be called developed again. Let us all strive and push, and let us all know that we are seeking for peace. So as you go out there, be an agent of peace and be a change of peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Nana Kojo, you have the final word.
Yeah. So, Daniel, last week I was in Koforidua for a very short purpose, and I visited many radio stations there. And there was one thing I said. I said this election is going to determine the future of Ghana. And when I was leaving the studio, I met one woman. She was like, I like the shirt you are wearing. I was wearing a t-shirt which had an inscription on it which says, "Thank you, Mr. President, for free SHS." And she was like, "Young man, I like your shirt. Do you know why?" She made me understand that anytime we, final year students, JHS graduates who were leaving to school, were moving to school, Ghana became poorer. And why is that? Because anytime we graduates were going to school, our parents had to sell their if they had a sewing machine, or if they had any cloth, they had to sell it to send us to school. But then when we had the implementation of free SHS, now we would realize that Ghana is starting to rise up from its knees. And so one thing I'll urge is that all of us, the youth, we should all go out there to vote, because if we vote this coming election, we are defending our future. And also one thing I'll talk about for my final words is that we should be an agent of peace.
Okay.
Because as we go out there in December, it is one thing, we are voting for the development and betterment of Ghana,
right,
and not for a political party. And so, irrespective of our political colors, let's always remember that Ghana comes first. Let's all vote to defend our future.
Ghana comes first, indeed. Kobe, we've heard the young people speak.
Daniel, in your own submission, you suggested that the way we are dealing with corruption has been, says, government says. How do we demystify this whole business of corruption or anti-corruption campaigns, so that young people don't need someone from a stream to come and tell them that what is happening here is corruption? How do we make it unattractive to the extent that even as a young person, when it is happening, you don't feel encouraged at all to engage in it? Because Martha was trying to espouse that perspective, but it is something that we must make part of our lives, so that everybody believes that it is not attractive to be corrupt. Otherwise, what is the point?
Interesting thoughts there. Kobe Gomez Mensah is a researcher with a first-time voters campaign. He ended that discussion there. Many thanks to all of our guests: Nana Kojo Apau, Jesse, Stephen Poby, Peter Kofi Kilson Akins, Emmanuel, who joined us on phone from Takrady, Prince Ameko, and Martha Boateng, who are all first-time voters. My name is Daniel Dadzie. Many thanks for joining us for Ghana Connects. Thanks to Manuel Kranting and Ernest Menu for doing the production, and a special good evening to Elvis Kwashi. Up next is the first take with the locker room with George Adu Jr. and the sports team. We'll be back next week with Ghana Connect, hopefully, if